Today on the podcast, you will hear my interview with the fabulous Laura Sinclair of Stress Free Studio. We talked all about the ways teaching can evolve for the benefit of both your students and yourself. I found her to be completely inspiring on this topic, a topic which has long been a passion for me as well. What if teaching your students didn't have to drain you? What if teaching your students was an opportunity for you to get more paid and them to get more value from the experience? What if there was a better way? Laura Sinclair is an active performer, Suzuki teacher, speaker, and coach. She is passionate about helping musicians build successful and sustainable teaching studios that support their overall artistic goals. Laura has presented talks around the country in conferences, lecture halls, and virtual spaces for higher education institutions, like the New England Conservatory of Music, Lynn Conservatory of Music, the American String Teachers Association, the Suzuki Association of the Americas, and convenings across the country for Jazz Roads for South Arts. Laura also does this through her bespoke coaching program, Stress Free Studio. I know that you will love this episode. Laura Sinclair, welcome to Crushing Classical.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited to hear from you about the way you coach teachers on studio development. Stress-free studio is something I saw on your website. Yes. I think this is going to be such a valuable conversation for our listeners. And can we start by just having you introduce yourself to the people and tell a little bit of the story that brings us to where we are now?
Oh, amazing. So my name is Laura Sinclair. I'm a violist, educator, speaker, coach based in Delray Beach, Florida. And I developed a program called Stress Free Studio to help teachers automate a lot of the business systems that, well, let me put it better this way. I help studio teachers develop sustainable and successful teaching practices that don't take them a lot of time and midwise, and guide them towards the teaching that really lights them up. That being said, a decade ago, I was not that teacher. So I spent about 10 years in South Florida building my studio to what I thought was success, which was freelance musician. We have a very robust freelance scene here in Southeast Florida. And I'm a Suzuki teacher, so it was group classes, recitals, lessons, everything. And by the time the pandemic hit, I was completely burnt out. 100% done. And it took the pandemic for me to really have to get to sit back and go, I'm operating my studio like I think I should be operating it, not how I want to be operating it. So that led me on a journey to redevelop my own studio. That led me on a journey to assess my values and have a values first approach to my studio. And then life was so different on the other side of things. And I was such a different person that I was like, I want everyone to feel this and love teaching again. Because I think a lot of the resistance to teaching if you're a performer who is teaching curious, the resistance is not to the actual teaching itself. It can be just to the business systems and a fear of the business systems that go around it. And all of the horror stories that we all share at gigs backstage. So, that's what led me here. And I'm so thrilled. I've helped dozens of teachers redo their businesses at this point, and it continues to grow. And I just love that that's part of the portfolio of what I do.
Amazing. So you describe remaking your studio in the way that you want to teach so that you get to do it in a values first way and in exactly the way that works best for you. Why doesn't everybody do that? It sounds so obvious that that's the way we should be teaching.
I think that's because it doesn't necessarily fit with what everyone else is doing or how it was done when we were students. I think when I
Mm-hmm.
speak to a group of teachers, everyone started in one of two ways. You either started in a group situation at school and fell into private lessons, or you started in private lessons and then were fed into like a youth orchestra system or something like that. And perhaps the examples that we had in front of us in a less busier time of existence no longer serves a portfolio musician who also wants to have a meaningful performance career, or is a recording artist, or is on tour, or even in my instance, I'm performing 8 weeks of the year, not in Southeast Florida. I'm over with the Naples Philharmonic. I pop onto the Hamilton tour. And so I have, when we speak values first, I have elderly Canadians in my life that I want to be a part of, like, I want to be available to help. And that was really, we had a health scare in 2020 that kind of like made me wake up and go, I need to be available to these people. Um, and I think it can be a scary thing to do because if your payment systems are not set up in the right way, your studio is not set up in the right way, missing a lesson means missing income.
Yeah, for sure. And leaving town feels like, well, I guess teaching is over. I guess teaching is completely out this week because I am traveling to Canada, because I am on tour. Like, I can't serve my students. That's not in the best interests of my students. I'm just naming all of these
Yeah.
mindset issues. Like, maybe I shouldn't be a teacher at all if I can't really commit to like showing up every Tuesday at 4:15 for this one child.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And I think it keeps a lot of us from teaching because we think we need to be able to offer the regularity. And I would say you need to offer the regularity when you can. But what parents really want isn't necessarily regularity. They just want to know that there's a plan
Hmm.
and that you're the guide to take them there and you have a plan for their child and you're as invested as they are.
Wait a minute. Do you mean that every student doesn't need to be taught every single week for a half an hour, whether or not they have, made progress over the previous week and whether or not they want to?
It's possible. It's possible. I love the weekly lesson. Don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
As a
Sure.
Suzuki educator, my kids are tiny, so weekly contact with them weekly contact with them is necessary. How it happens is different. So for me, weekly contact could be a virtual lesson. It can be an in-person lesson. It means that there's probably group class, but on a day that works for me, not Saturday mornings.
Hmm.
And or it's asynchronous learning. We have so many powerful tools where if they send you a video where they're performing, you can easily record something using like something more than just you could send them a voice memo or a face to camera back, of course. You can also use something that's going to create a transcript and a plan for them based on what you talk about in the lesson in that video back to them. So
Hmm.
um, I think we have so many possibilities.
Like, already I can feel my shoulders easing. And, I went through my own teaching burnout journey in like 2019 and have restructured everything that I'm doing since then. So you're preaching to the choir here. And I'm a little bit playing the dum dum to set you up here. So let me ask another dum dum question. Wait, if I am traveling, if I am on tour, if I decide that I cannot teach this week, if I am not available for those students, where's the money? How am I getting paid? Like,
Mm,
because as we know, teaching can be so fulfilling, it can be so magical, and it can be so beneficial to us as performers, but we also need the money.
yeah. So a lot of the people I work with, I guide towards a tuition based system that is designed around what they do. So for some of them, it's 6 weeks on and 1 week off of teaching so that they are like burnout prevention weeks, basically, where something else is offered. Masterclass lessons where everyone's showing, you're seeing all of your students, but in a shortened amount of time. Um, it can also be a complete week off for you. There are performance weeks where it's very easy for me to see my students anyway, and I'm happy to.
Mhm.
And there are performance weeks where I don't see anyone. And what's important is that you use the lesson that you saw them the week before and make a 2-week plan instead of a 1-week plan. And also, if you feel like you have a student that needs that status check, and some of them do, for
Mhm.
accountability, it's a video assignment. It's text me an emoji when you've practiced. It's I have high schoolers that send me dinosaurs every once in a while. That's all they send. And I know that's
Mhm.
because their instrument is out. I think there's possibilities there.
Yeah. Incredible. Because when the teaching exists as a stable and predictable part of your income, like it gives you the safety to create new things, to create new income streams, to create new performance opportunities, to create ideas that may or may not even work because
Yeah,
we have to experiment.
exactly. And it creates this environment because it's tuition based and service based. You're promising these families. I always talk in families because I'm typically working with kids, but some people are only working with adults. There's lots of very successful teachers out there who only have adult clients. I think that what tuition based learning does is create this base income for us to be creative with our studio. We know that the money is coming in, and we know that we can expect a certain amount of income every month from that teaching. Whereas if you are charging by the lesson, if you're charging month by month, I think everyone listening to this at some point has had a parent walk in their studio and say, oh, we're going to miss the next 2 lessons. Here's a check for half of what you were expecting for that month.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Always, always. I can't say it never happens with the tuition based system. I'm sure somebody could sit down and assign a value to your lesson and try to remove it from your payment. But there's lots of systems that we can put in place to protect you from that, like automated payments. Um, Automated payments kind of really do the thing. But by changing the mindset towards like a flat rate, like a car
Mm-hmm.
payment, private school tuition, whatever, the parents now know they're investing in a full experience, not just the 60 minutes they spend with you once a week on Tuesday at 4:15.
Yes. Yes. And it creates not just steady income for you, but also a feeling of the value that they are paying for.
Exactly.
In that, like, what does that enrollment conversation, what might that enrollment conversation look like? If you're talking to a family or to a student who's independently negotiating and they're anticipating that they're going to pay you for their 45-minute lesson weekly.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, the best conversion from inquiry to student has always been to invite them to experience what my studio does. So for a family that's interested in what I do, I invite them to come watch group class because I want them to come witness that it's not just a lesson with me. I do a Zoom interview before I do anything. I never meet a child first because I love kids and
Mm-hmm.
I fall in love with every child on earth instantly, no matter what. I can't say the same for parents because we can have very differing philosophies on how we want to achieve great learning and success together. So I invite them to come watch group class because I want them to see my teaching in action, and I want them to see the synergy of the kids working together to create a creative project together. From there, then the conversation enters into come watch a lesson. But always it's, if you're looking just for lessons for 45 minutes, for me at this point, I can be blunt and say, this isn't the studio for you. You know, what I'm looking for, and I guess it leads towards like engineering towards your ideal student, is I'm looking for a family that has enough space to invest a time for the violin every day, but also time to come and be part of a community once a
Mm.
week and be part of the lesson experience.
Yes. And being willing, like what I'm hearing you say is that you are willing to turn down the $100 or $80 or $200 that someone is willing to pay you for that 45-minute lesson if they are not going to be a person who's going to fit into your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, my students are very much legacy students. If they start with me at 4 or 5, some of them move on middle school to high school depending on their goals. But if they, I would say the ones that stay for the longest, because I think a change in teacher at some point is good because we do become kind of like another parent and we sound like the parents on Peanuts that wah, 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 wah. We don't make any sense to them anymore. But for the busy teenager who just loves Miss Laura and has always and just wants, like, they will continue with me through 12th grade easily. So I look at it as a relationship. So if I'm tracking that student, I've had them in my studio for 8 to 10 years. It's worth it for me to really invest in finding the right students to be there.
Amazing. I feel like I can hear in my ears some of my listeners going, well, but I don't do Suzuki.
Mm-hmm.
So like we don't have a non-Suzuki players don't necessarily have a culture of mixed level classes.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do if you've got like 4-year-olds and 15-year-olds?
It can be anything. It can be anything. It can be as simple as, and community doesn't have to be a complicated thing. It can be as simple as monthly studio class that's divided by age, not necessarily ability. You don't want a 15-year-old in class with the 4-year-olds. Mind you, my 4-year-olds are really in love with those teenagers and really, and the teenagers are, I have to say, some of the best students because they really the love is mutual. They're happy to see them. They ask them about the pieces that they're playing. It's just so heartwarming. But I think a traditional teacher has so many options. Like, does music theory really light you up? Do you really wish your students knew anything about audiation? Do you want to do ear training? Like, the offering potential for anything that can build upon what you're trying to achieve in a private lesson is endless.
Yes. And the kinds of things that you don't ever have time to teach in the context of a private session because you're, busy with the actual piece, with the actual technique, with the actual whatever you're working on. The kinds of big picture ideas that you can share in a group.
Yeah. And it's like the vibe is different. And for me, like, I've played around with so many things. We've done like teen technique classes because no one wants to work on vibrato on their own. Like, it's an awful experience. But if we can make it fun and silly as a group, it's a little bit more palatable, I would say. And I think the possibilities are endless for anyone out there.
Fantastic. I love hearing this. So like I can hear how creative and how like fun it must be to be a violin playing member of your studio or a viola playing member of your studio. But everyone is not a student. Some people are like existing teachers. So right now, what I'm trying to ask is, what does it look like to work with you as a coach and to revamp your studio in that way? And at what point did it occur to you that is a way you could be helpful to the musical community at large?
It started with colleagues starting to notice that I had changed what I was doing and I was seeming much happier on gigs. Yeah. And I wasn't the usual person who was naysaying, oh, I have to go home and teach. I was like, no, I actually really like them. And they're good little humans. And it was through my own process of, I realized that I had just fallen into teaching. And what had served me when I was teaching 4 students didn't serve me when I had a studio of 30. And how do you convert your studio culture when you don't necessarily need to have those systems in place for 4 students, but you do need them. You need something that can grow with you and serve you for 30 students. And so as I applied it to my own studio and kept hearing the same complaints through my colleagues, my Suzuki teaching colleagues, through my friends at gigs. I was like, this is something that's missing. And it's something missing from the get-go. Like from our, I'm going to say it, from our college education, because I have sat in seminars with college professors who have said, when asked how much they charge per lesson, they go, oh, I just charge $60 an hour because $1 a minute is what I can remember.
Interesting.
So I am stepping into the world of this needs to be talked about.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to remain the same because it's been the same.
Sorry, I'm still like floored by because that's a number I can remember.
It's a number I can remember.
I'm blown away. There are so many numbers I could remember.
Yeah, I can remember $1,000 better than I can remember 60.
I can remember lots of things. Wow. Because in so many cases, we are in colleges, in music schools, and we're learning from teachers who, a generation before us or multiple generations before us came up through this same system of having one-to-one lessons and maybe a few group classes, and now they are teaching they're in a school, and they're not trying to do the same things that millennials and Gen Z are trying to do. In other words, make an actual living in this 21st century musical landscape. And they are not, they have had no need to be creative in the way that you are, suggesting,
Mm-hmm.
right? The creativity, saying nothing against actual college professors who
we love our college professors.
We love them, and they're doing fantastic, and they got us here. But private lessons and studio class once a week, once a month is sort of what they know.
Yeah.
And I smile, I smile ruefully thinking about the amount of money I actually paid to my college for the privilege of getting private lessons and studio class once a week. And then to then come out and think in terms of, $1 a minute, it just feels so small.
It does.
So small.
Does. And it's kind of backwards because we're just taught that people saying yes to us, like demand equals legitimacy. So we're just supposed to say yes to anybody who asks for lessons.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Sure.
I mean, that was my attitude when I first got out of 9 years of academia. I was like, oh, well, I need to teach everyone.
Mm-hmm. But which when you're just out of academia, mm-hmm. like I'm going to argue back a little bit, like you have to figure out what your teaching style is by doing it. And you have to figure out who your ideal student is by meeting them mm-hmm. and by doing the thing for a little while. And so I guess I ask, I've been thinking about this conversation from my own perspective as, mm-hmm. doing the thing, doing the one-to-one forever, doing the adjunct college gigs forever, and finally being burned out enough to actually make the change into something that works so much better for me. And so I guess I'm imagining that your clients are me from 10 years ago, but I don't know that they are. Tell me more. Are you working with people right out of school?
No, at times, but typically I would say that the target audience and who really love to come and lean into the work with me are people, as you described, have been running their studio for a while, maybe started with 4 students, maybe have a handful of those students that aren't necessarily the right fit, but are still part of their studio, kind of like legacy students.
Yeah.
And they're ready to make the change from, this is my ad hoc studio that I formed while I was figuring myself out.
Yes.
And typically those students are used to a lower rate of pay, really loose studio policies, if there is any, like very loose cancellation policies and scheduling. They're used to calling you 10 minutes beforehand and saying, hey, the weather's really nice, I'm going to the beach, instead of coming for a lesson, kind of stuff. And how do we successfully take that group of students and transition them into a new way of being and into a more flat rate, holistic education system, because you want to serve them better, without alienating them? So it's transformation without alienation.
That's the hard part.
That's the hard part. And I think that's a sticking point, I think, for a lot of people. We're like, well, we can't possibly do this, because you look at the number that you're maybe being paid by those 20 students and you're like, well, it's a living.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens if I change and they all leave?
Right.
Which is a major fear.
Absolutely. I've worked with clients on this exact fear, and I have felt this exact fear.
Right.
And on the other side of it, what if 20% of them do leave, but the other 80% pay you more and it works out better for you, and you are able to deliver a more transformational experience to them while having a little bit more spaciousness in your own life and your own schedule? What if that was the result?
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's kind of like, the Mel Robbins let them theory. What if they leave? Well, the ones that, in my experience, both in my own studio and in others, is the ones that leave weren't a good fit from the get-go. And there's ways to make that a gracious transition. If you have a colleague that you think that would be a better fit for them, a studio with less rigor, or, a friend who truly does only want to teach lessons and has a great way of doing it, you think it will be a good fit, help them make that transition.
Mm-hmm.
Like, believe that the other teachers are not the sharks in the water.
Yes. Because actually, when the musicians and the music teachers in your community are all thriving, the community is better and the students get a better experience. They might be having a better experience and learning better with a different human being, not because you're bad at what you do, but because they might just be a better fit somewhere else.
Exactly. And I don't think we should feel bad about it. And I don't think we should feel like it's a reflection on us as teachers. Yeah.
This is beautiful and so inspiring, Laura. It's really good to hear these things said.
I mean, I really have been, it's so, what I love about coaching work is it's so nice to sit back and help people and hold their hand while you take this thing that we care about so deeply. I've never met a teacher who's come to me as a client and been like, I don't like children, I don't like teaching, this is not for me, but I need to do it because I need to make money. No, it's all, I love doing this. This is an essential part of me as a musician.
Yeah.
How do I do this and be all of me? Which goes back to like developing it from your values up.
I feel like you've said values a few times, and I would love to follow up on that word. What does that look like to start with? I feel like that's not a conversation that we have as teachers. Will you teach me lessons? Sure. How's Tuesday? Will you teach me lessons? Sure. How's family? Like, can you talk just a little bit about how you help people to discern even what their values for their teaching are?
That's a great question. So part of the process is to kind of do a life audit that's away from your teaching. Has almost nothing. What else is in your identity? Part of my identity is daughter and partner and stepmom and Canadian.
Yeah.
And what are the things about your life that are the non-negotiables that have nothing to do with your teaching? I've had clients who are married to school teachers and somehow were teaching all of their makeup lessons on the Thanksgiving break and spring break and never took a vacation with their spouse because they were busy making up the lessons that they thought they needed to make up. doesn't lead to anyone in that house being happy. And certainly your students will, not that your students are going to sense what's going on in your marriage, but like your students are going to always benefit from somebody who's feeling healthy in all of their relationships.
Yeah.
And so, for me, I spent 10 years in the public school classroom and realized that my mornings are my best creative space. In order for me to really embrace those, I needed to find a way to get out
Yeah.
of that space, and I did. And now I write curriculum for a nonprofit instead that I can do anytime, anywhere. So I think
Gorgeous.
there's ways for us to, if you assess, I like to help people assess what they want to do with themselves as a human and what their priorities are beyond the instrument, beyond the lesson. And then we develop a teaching practice that around that, instead of developing your life around your teaching.
Mm. Mm. Beautiful. Beautiful. What an inspiring conversation. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you would like to share here that I haven't made space for in this conversation?
We've talked a lot about everything that I do with my clients. I would just say that the enrollment for my stress-free studio program is open. I invite any of your listeners, if they're curious about it or work together, to have a free 30-minute studio consult with me. That's open and on my website, lauraksinclair.com. Schedule some time with me. We'll talk about your teaching, and you will definitely walk away with some actionable steps that you can apply to your teaching immediately. Also, we'll talk about the intersections of what stress-free studio could do for you, but I love meeting teachers and talking about what life looks like for them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.